Hey, ghoul friend. It's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of paranormal folklore from Latin American cultures. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. And if this is your first time, welcome to the circle of light, where we protect each other from all the scary, evil things out there, even though I am here. Just kidding. I hope everyone is having a wonderful week. We are in a time right now where many people are gathering with their loved ones, family, friends, chosen family at the moment. So whether you are listening to this while you are maybe cooking a feast in the kitchen, you're traveling, you're working, whatever you happen to be doing, thank you for sharing this moment with me and letting me haunt you. Quick updates: as you may have seen, Strange and Extraordinary Fest was postponed. Bit of a bummer there, but the organizers are working on securing a new date, so please stay tuned for that. I'm still locked in for that event. Of course, pending the date, hopefully it'll work out with the new scheduled thing. But this is why it's important to follow at Susto Podcast on every social media platform, because that is how you get the most up-to-date information on what I'm doing, on what's going on. You know, aside from the fun content and all that, you know, you get that breaking news, so to speak. But either way, stay tuned for that. More information to come. We have prepared for you today a monster of an episode because it's the last episode of Susto for the year. So next month in December, as I have been doing for the last couple of years, is the Susto Swapathon. I cannot wait to bring you some shows that I think that you will enjoy, that I have been enjoying. If this is your first Susto Swapathon, essentially what I do is I swap episodes with shows that I have been enjoying that I think that you all would like, and kind of introduce you to some more content that is out there, some other really cool creators. We have, of course, another banger of a lineup this year, so make sure that you tune in throughout the month of December. Although there will not be any new Susto episodes, there will be something in the feed for you, so you'll still get your notification and you can check out something new while I am kind of on a bit of a break. But like I said, this is a monster of an episode because we actually worked in an interview with comic creator Rafael Flores into this episode. So this is going to be like, you know, the full Susto episode with story. We'll have sources, of course, but we're also going to have an interview during the episode, which I'm really excited about, and you will hear all about that, of course, once you get into it after the story. Before we do take flight into the darkness that is today's episode, we are going to read a comment from Spotify. Again, you all heard me talk about Spotify last episode. We are not giving them our money. We are not giving them our paid memberships, but people do listen on Spotify and I do not want to ignore them, and they're leaving comments. So this is going to be an interesting one. This is from, quote, the girl who left a comment on the El Silvon episode, and they said, "Will the name of Jesus save you from El Silvon? My family is very Catholic and my family is from Latin America as well. And the name of Jesus is more powerful than anyone and anything. I claim no negative energy and may God protect you all." Okay, Miss Girl. So actually, in order to protect yourself from El Silvon, you can rely on dogs and chili peppers or a whip, because he is afraid of those things. If you listened to the episode, I hope that you got to that part of it. You would know that aside from, sure, try Jesus, you can try these nifty little tricks that will protect you from him. This is kind of just a silly comment to me. I'm sure this person was not being silly, but I think it's funny. And that's funny. I made a TikTok kind of about that the other day because I get that comment a lot. And not that I mock my audience, listeners, my ghoul friends, but it's just this thing. I don't know what it is. And I'm sure you all have seen it online where people on a scary video, they will leave the comment, "I claim no negative energy." And I think I said something like, well, what if the energy claims you? Well, what then, diva? You got to be prepared. You cannot just say, "I want nothing to do with it," because it might want something to do with you. So, Ms. Girl, sure, you have Jesus. Let me also suggest for your arsenal of protection some chili and dogs and a whip if you have one lying around by any chance. I just thought it'd be fun to read that comment. And of course, the link to the episode of El Silvon, if you have not heard that episode, will be in the description below. Anyway, we are going to jump into today's episode, which is all about the Camazotz. The hills outside Guaban were the kind of beautiful that felt almost unreal. Rolling slopes coated in coffee plants shimmered in the morning light. Narrow terraces cut into the mountainsides glowed green and gold. Clouds drifted low and soft, snagging lazily on the ridge lines like wool pulled across combs. Birds traced arcs over the canopy, scarlet macaws, emerald toucans, flickers of neon life in the trees. Two brothers, Nico and Jonah, had hiked through these hills dozens of times. They knew the smell of the rich, damp earth. They knew how the stones warmed under the sun. They knew how the wind wandered through the leaves like fingers playing harp strings. This place was alive, vibrantly, beautifully alive, which made what came next feel impossible. Nico and Jonah had only intended to follow the trail of missing tourists into the hills of Alta Verapaz, nothing more than a search and rescue attempt. They had packed plenty of food and water to provide to the group of hikers who had gotten lost. It wasn't a long trip back to town, but the lost group had been out here for days and probably needed sustenance. As the brothers hiked, somewhere between two limestone gorges, the ground crumbled beneath them. The world flipped into blackness. They woke inside a cavern that wasn't on any map. It smelled of damp stone and something older, like mud mixed with blood. The walls were carved with symbols that looked more like wounds than art, slashes in the rock that pulsed faintly as if they remembered pain. Jonah whispered, "Where are we?" Nico didn't know. The tunnel they landed in smelled damp and stale. Their flashlights flickered across rough stone walls etched with a chaotic mix of old and new markings. Some were ancient Maya glyphs carved with deliberate skill. Others were jagged, rushed scratches. No sigan, no pasen, get out, death ahead, ayuda. One word they had only heard of in legends stood out among them, Xibalba. Nico called Jonah over to point out the word. "Isn't this the underworld myth?" Nico asked. "Yeah," Jonah replied. "Some of the Quiche people believe the entrance to Xibalba was in this area. I wonder if they think this is it." Jonah continued reading through various messages scrawled on the walls, some in languages he did not recognize. Finally, he ran his finger over one message written in charcoal. "The only way out is through." The brothers looked at each other and thought about this message that someone else had left for them. "Do we try to make our way through the caves?" Jonah asked. Nico responded with hesitation. "I don't think I can climb up out of here, so I guess we have to try the caves." They looked forward into the cave system and started their journey. Something dripped in the darkness. Something breathed. They kept moving and entered a large cavern. At first, Nico thought it was just the absence of light, but then his cell phone's flashlight dimmed, the beam shrinking, as if the darkness ate it. Jonah tried his phone. It flared for a moment before being snuffed out again. The dark wasn't empty. It was crowded, breathing, barely, but enough that they could hear something inhaled behind them and exhaled in front of them. They pressed themselves against the wall, hands sliding over carvings that felt warm and sticky, like coagulated blood. Every time they moved, the darkness moved with them, squeezing tighter, brushing their clothes like unseen fingers. Jonah whispered, "Don't stop, don't let it catch you." In the black, Nico could hear clicking, not from machinery or animals, but from hollow throats, the sound of teeth counting their steps. They didn't run. Running felt like what Xibalba wanted. They inched forward until a distant, sickly gray glow appeared, a threshold. They crossed it trembling and breathless, and the glow behind them folded up like a mouth closing. Nico tried to catch his breath as he asked, "What was that? Nothing about that felt natural." "I don't know," Jonah replied, "but I'm glad we're out of there. That darkness felt never-ending. I hope we don't have to go through anything like that again." Nico gasped as he pointed towards the walls. Just like before, they were covered in writing. The tunnel walls were slick with moisture, and the writing on the walls were denser here. Some glyphs they couldn't read, but scratched on top of them were more warnings. Cuchillos cayendo. Don't stir the air. Stay low. A set of footprints, small and bare, stopped abruptly beneath a warning that simply said, Perdónenme. The two brothers continued forward. The next chamber yawned open. Nico swept his flashlight across the room. At first, the ceiling appeared solid and black. It took a moment for their eyes to adjust and to realize it was shining back at them, like thousands of mirrors. Obsidian blades filled the ceiling, sheet after sheet of razor stone packed into natural shelves of brittle rock. The blades were not moving, just waiting. Jonah let out a deep breath, and the obsidian blades shook, loosely holding on to the ceiling of the cavern. The brothers looked down and saw the floor was gravel and loose stone. If a breath was enough to shake the blades, one wrong step on the loose gravel threatened to rattle the cavern. Go slow, Nico whispered. They placed each step with surgical precision, but when Nico slipped on a patch of pebbles, crunch, the sound echoed like a gunshot. A dozen obsidian shards cracked free and plunged down, spearing the ground between them. The blades sliced past Jonah's sleeve, opening a thin line of blood. Then another cascade began. Run! Jonah yelled. They sprinted, the ceiling cracking open behind them as obsidian shards fell like black hailstones. Fragments flew at their heels. One sliced Nico's shoulder deeply, but he didn't stop. Only when they dove into the next corridor did the deadly rain quiet. The brothers stopped and tended to Nico's shoulder. The cut wasn't serious, but it made it harder for him to move his arm around. As they wrapped the wound, they felt a gust of cold air. The upcoming walkway was coated in frost, but the brothers continued on. Their breath froze in the air. Their boots crunched over a thick layer of ice and snow, which should be impossible for this deep underground. More carvings appeared on the walls, scratched with shaking hands. Cold is alive. No dormir. Don't stop moving. One frozen handprint smeared across the wall ended in deep drag marks. Nico swallowed, and Jonah shivered. They kept going and stepped into the next chamber. The temperature dropped so fast Nico's ears popped. A wind moved through the cavern. It was not a natural breeze, but a steady, rhythmic gust, like something enormous inside the ice was slowly inhaling and exhaling. Frost coated the walls. Frozen footprints, dozens of them, littered the floor. Some trailed off into nothing. Others ended in sudden, sideways drags. Icicles hung from the ceiling like rows of transparent fangs. A pale blue light glowed from all the ice, just enough for the brothers to see where they are, but not enough to make it easy to navigate. The wind grew stronger. Something howled through the stalactites. A shriek formed from air ripping past ice. Jonah's lips went blue. Nico forced him forward. Keep moving. Keep talking. Their voices shook violently as they spoke nonsense just to stay conscious. Every time they slowed, the freezing wind tightened around their legs like hands made of ice. Only when they reached the next corridor did the temperature ease, like the room had reluctantly released them. Their skin was stinging from the cold. They sat together until they got the feelings back in their limbs. I don't want to stay here any longer. I want to get out of these horrible caves, Nico decided. The brothers looked around this new passage they found themselves in. The floors and walls were littered with claw marks, not like any animal markings they had seen, but also not human. Deep gashes gouged into the rock, some fresh, some ancient. Blood stained the floor in handprint smears. More warnings covered the walls. No son animales. Don't run. Te miran. A larger message read, "They eat you slowly." Jonah swallowed hard. The air changed again in the next chamber. It reeked with musk and rot. Then came the growls, deep, rolling, hungry. Eyes opened in the darkness ahead, dozens of them glinting like polished gold with slit pupils that narrowed as they approached. These were not the jaguars you see in documentaries. Their bodies were gaunt, yet powerful, ribs sharp under pale fur. Their tails were short, as if worn down by scraping against stone. Their mouths were stained black and red. The brothers froze. The jaguars didn't attack immediately. They circled, herding Nico and Jonah, deciding how to divide the meal. Nico slowly reached into his bag, remembering the food they had packed for the missing hikers. Every jaguar tensed, ready to spring. He unwrapped some protein bars and tossed them onto the floor. The beasts lunged, not at the brothers, but at the food. They fought each other with snapping jaws and tearing claws. The sound was wet and frantic. "Go," Nico whispered. They skirted the wall, keeping their eyes down, moving as silently as possible. One jaguar lifted its blood-slicked head and watched them, its growl low and questioning, but it did not attack. As they crossed into the next passage, the jaguar's feast developed into snarling chaos behind them. The air grew sulphurous. The walls glowed faintly red beneath soot. Every step they took down this passage, the air grew warmer and warmer. Scrawled warnings covered every surface. Eruptions below. La tierra respira. Don't stop. Don't ever stop. One message read in English. I can hear the earth's heartbeat. The heat pressed against them like a warning to not continue to the next chamber. With no other choice, they went ahead anyway. The cavern pulsed red like a living wound. Rivers of molten magma bled through cracks in the stone floor. Superheated steam vented in great, violent whooshes. Embers floated in the air like malignant fireflies. The ground trembled in intervals, short, sharp quakes. Jonah crouched near a vent. "It's breathing," he whispered. "The mountain. It's alive." They moved between eruptions, timing their steps. When the ground inhaled, steam died down. When it exhaled, a geyser of scalding vapor blasted upward. A near miss burned Jonah's forearm instantly. He bit down a scream. The cavern shuddered harder. A glowing chunk of rock cracked loose from the ceiling and burst against the floor behind them. They sprinted across the last stretch as the magma rivers brightened, the floor cracking open. They dove out just before a wave of molten stone surged across where they'd stood. The next passage felt normal. No heat followed them. The air was stale and damp. The brothers sat and drank as much of their water as they could. The heat from the previous chamber had left them tired and dehydrated. "I don't know how much more I can do," Nico said softly. "I'm just too tired." Jonah paused for a moment. "We have to keep going. I don't want to die down here. Every chamber is trying to kill us, but I won't let it. We can rest, but we aren't going to give up." Nico nodded at his brother and looked around this space. This passage was more narrow than the others before. It made the brothers feel claustrophobic. The walls were once again packed with scratches. "Don't look up. Muévete en silencio. The big one picks who dies." The air stank of ammonia and decay. The sound came softly. Whispers. Hungry whispers. The brothers stepped into the next chamber, wondering how many more of these they would have to get through to escape this otherworldly cave system. Their flashlights barely penetrated the darkness. The beams seemed to recoil, bending away as if afraid of what lay ahead. The cavern looked like it had been built. There were limestone pillars around the sides of it, some of which had fallen with time. There was also a raised platform in the middle with a pedestal for offerings. As the brothers surveyed the space, the sounds grew louder. The sound of claws scraping stone. Not small claws. Jonah whispered, "Nico, look," as he pointed his phone's flashlight up. The ceiling wasn't just textured rock. It was covered completely in bodies. Pale, skinless wings pressed together like layers of raw meat. Bats hung in clusters, thousands of them, but each was odd. Their limbs too long, their rib cages visible, their snouts elongated into jagged bone. Some were missing eyes, some had too many, and some twitched in feverish dreams. As Nico's flashlight swept across them, every single bat froze. And then they opened their eyes. A wave of gleaming red pinpricks stared down at the brothers. The room exhaled, a wet, rattling sound that made Jonah's knees buckle. Something large dropped from the ceiling behind them. Nico turned the light and wished he hadn't. The creature towering over them had the posture of a man, but the anatomy of a nightmare. Elongated limbs folded at wrong angles, leathery wings dragging across the floor, a chest that rose and fell in ragged, deliberate breaths. Its head was a grotesque bat skull with obsidian fangs protruding like knives. Its nose ended in a sharp, spear-like point. Its eyes were pits of black honey, reflective, wet, hungry. Camazotz, the death bat, the god of decapitation. The creature leaned towards them and inhaled deeply, sniffing the air around their throats. Nico grabbed Jonah's jacket and pulled him behind a limestone pillar. The bats on the ceiling began to shudder, the beginnings of a frenzy. Camazotz stalked, step by slow step, its talons tapping the floor like fingernails on a coffin. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't chasing, it was testing. Jonah whispered too loudly, "Nico, what do we do?" A shriek erupted from the creature, a metallic, bone-scraping sound that vibrated their ribs. The bats overhead exploded into flight, a cyclone of bodies and teeth filling the cavern in a living storm. Nico shoved Jonah toward a fallen slab of stone. They dove behind it as the swarm battered the barrier, wings slapping like wet towels, claws scraping at the edges. Camazotz approached the slab, slowly, with intention. Tap, tap. It leaned close, sniffing. Its breath was hot and damp and smelled like rusty knives. Then, impossibly fast, it slammed the slab, the stone cracking like an egg. Nico and Jonah ran. The bats descended behind them in a screeching tide. Something heavy hit the ground. Camazotz leaping into pursuit, its claws gouging trenches in the floor. The exit tunnel narrowed, too narrow for their monster, barely wide enough for a human. "Jonah, go!" Jonah squeezed through the crack. Nico followed until a talon wrapped around his ankle and dragged him back. He screamed, clawing at the ground. Jonah grabbed his arms, pulling with all his strength. Nico felt the claws digging into his skin, the cold obsidian nose spike grazing his throat. Camazotz paused. It wanted him to look, to understand. Then it made its mark. A single precise slice, shallow but bleeding across Nico's throat. Not killing him, claiming him. Jonah pulled with everything he had, and the crack in the stone finally widened enough for Nico to slip through. They collapsed into a side tunnel. Behind them, the bats shrieked in fury, and Camazotz roared a sound that shook the wall of the chamber. The passage collapsed, severing the chamber from them. The caves returned to normal, stone walls with the faint light right ahead. They ran until they reached the daylight. They survived Xibalba. But Nico's scar never healed. Sometimes it pulses, like a heartbeat that isn't his. Jonah avoids nightfall like a phobia, and Nico wakes to the sound of tap, tap, tap at his window. Not always, just on the darkest nights. The nights when shadows move in ways they shouldn't. The nights when the air tastes like blood. Because Camazotz doesn't hunt just for food. He hunts for what escapes him. And now, he knows Nico's name. Welcome back, Wolf Friends. As I mentioned earlier, before the story, we are joined now by Rafael Flores, who is the writer and creator of the comic The Return of Camazotz and a co-owner of Grimcore Studios. Rafael, welcome to Susto. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I've been, following you for since maybe it's like a year now, last Next Americon.
Yeah,
Not
we
this,
first met at Mex Americon, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And dude, I've been so excited to be on the podcast. So I love your vibe and like the headphones, everything, man, everything
My
about it.
horns.
Yeah,
Thank you. Well, I also love your vibe. And yeah, I remember we met a year ago. We just did Mex Americon again this
yeah.
year, November 1st. And that was my second year there, I think.
Me
Was
too.
you
Yep,
too? Okay,
yep.
perfect. Yeah, and our first year we did that panel together, which was really great.
Yeah.
So yeah, this has been basically a year in the making because as my listeners, if they know me at all, they know that I have these ideas and I'm like, it's going to happen. And then who knows, life gets in the way. So I'm
Right.
glad that we are finally here. And I'm excited to talk to you about your work. And speaking of, can you just share a bit about your background as a comic creator and how you got into writing comics?
So I was always a fan of comics growing up, like at a very young age. They were what taught me to read. They what got me interested in reading. Even though my teachers wouldn't don't consider it real reading, you know what I mean? But I knew I was reading, and it's interesting because the comics in the '90s, the reading level is like it's for men, you know what I mean? It was for
Yeah.
grown adults, but you were a kid reading these books.
Yeah.
So like you were learning, I was learning vocabulary and all that kind of stuff. But and also it was just cool. I loved the artwork. I loved reading like X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman. Batman was one of my favorites. I would get him very regularly. I remember when I was young, like maybe like six, I got like my first like shoebox of comics from one of my older cousins, and it was just a bunch of random '90s comics. And I read those and like loved them so much, like that. The pages would fall out. I would pin them on my wall because I love the artwork. I was just such a big fan at a very young age, and so that just kind of continued as I got older. I started reading more like of the classic graphic novels, things like Watchmen, like Batman: The Long Halloween, and I started getting more into like Vertigo and Image comics as I got older. And worked at a comic shop for a couple of years, collected comics and games here in Halton City. Um, I I always knew I wanted to write comics. I always knew I wanted to make comic books. I didn't think I could be an artist, but I knew I could write a good story. I've always been a good storyteller. I felt my essays and stuff in college. I used to do filmmaking in college. I wrote a lot of scripts, screenplays. I studied that kind of stuff, and so I kind of applied all that stuff to writing comic books. Um, just because there's no like real comic book school over here in Texas, you know what I mean? Like they don't teach that. I think it should be something that they teach, but at least where I'm from, in Dallas, Fort Worth area, there's like nothing. You can't. So I had to basically teach myself how to write comic books
Yeah.
from like going online, listening to interviews with other comic creators. One of my favorite thing what I would do was I would watch those recordings of like Comic Con panels at like the
Mm,
San Diego Comic Con or something, and I would listen to the writers talk about their process or the artists talk about their process, and that's kind of how I taught myself. That was like my school.
that is
Um,
so cool.
yeah, and I would check out comic books from the library, and a lot of times in the back of the graphic novel, they'll have like a look behind the scenes section where they'll show you like a piece of script or they'll show you like some artwork and stuff. Um, advanced a couple years. I became a librarian, working at a library, and that was all just because like I wanted to be around all the inspiration, movies, books, comic books, so that I could continue achieving my dream or reaching for my dream of writing comic books. And so, but I knew I needed a job so I could like pay the bills and
Yeah.
afford to make comic books and stuff. Because making comics is expensive. It's actually a very if you're the writer, you're paying for everything. You're the producer
Yeah.
of the comic. So a lot of times, at least if it's independent, when you're working with DC or Marvel, they'll pay you.
Yeah.
But when you're getting started, you really have to kind of get your own work out there.
You said that you were a librarian. I had no idea about that, and I think that is so so cool. I'm interested in hearing a bit more about your time as a librarian. Like, what was that like for you? I think I'm like a I guess like a fan is, I think it's a
Yeah.
the weird thing to say, but it's how I
No,
feel.
libraries are great.
Yeah, about libraries and librarians. I do events at the Austin Public Library. I've been very fortunate to have them invite me out for certain things, and every
Mhm.
time I'm like, everybody get a library card. Like, please use your libraries. They are amazing resources, not just for books, but as community centers. And so,
Mhm.
so one, thank you for that. I think that's amazing that you were a librarian. And I don't know, can you like,
Yeah.
what was like maybe like the most interesting thing that you saw as a librarian?
Okay, I'll say this as it relates to me. The most
Yeah.
interesting thing I've seen and noticed is that kids today, they love comic books, and parents are a little bit more, you're right. People are more becoming more accepting. Teachers are more accepting now. And I think it's because of the Marvel movies that came out, after that, it was like nothing they could do about it, right? Kids are going to read comic books.
Yeah.
But also you got things like Dog Man, which is like literally
Yeah.
the king of comic books right now. He
Yeah.
makes more money than anything. You got these really good kid comics going on right now. It's like a golden age of kid comics, YA. And so I'm noticing the shift of not only the acceptance, but also just there's more of it. There's more comics being made now than ever. You're seeing it now for all the way from children to adults,
Yeah.
and you're seeing more money put into like Scholastic. Uh, you know, Everything they make nowadays is really cool. And they're on these lists of like awards or winning awards now. You know what I mean? So like it's been really cool to see that shift happen.
Hmm.
Because when I was in college, going to library school, like there it's I would talk to people. Well, the librarian school was actually really cool. Like those classes were cool. But
Yeah.
I would be like in a history class or something, and my teacher would say like, "Have any of y'all read a book, based off that was made into a movie?" And I raised my hand and I was like, "Watchmen." I read Watchmen,
Hmm.
and he was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "It's a comic book. It's a graphic novel." He goes, I'm talking about a real book. And he like
Oh
laughs on my face. He
God.
just goes, he laughs on my face and he just walks away like, you're an idiot. And I was just like, what the fuck, dude?
That's
Like,
terrible. What the hell? Oh my
yeah.
God.
And so like I'm dealing with that in college and stuff, and I'm like, nothing's changed. People are still the same. I was thinking.
Yeah.
But when you go into libraries, I think librarians are on the edge of everything. So they know what's popular, they know what's the trends are,
Yeah.
and they can see comic books are growing and more people are enjoying reading them and they're being more accepted. Librarians are going to accept them because it's reading. They understand that comic books are reading.
Yeah.
So yeah, and how I got into it, I was working. I don't know. Honestly, my college was terrible because like I started as like I wanted to be an animator because I love cartoons. I loved comic books, and I wanted to make cartoons, right?
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, well, I can't really draw good, so I'm going to be a writer. I'll write the cartoons, right? And so I was taking like filmmaking, journalism, any writing class I could find. And I taught myself a lot about writing. Did a bunch of short stories and screenplays and stuff like that. But I would make short films, right? And I would enter them to like the school competition, right? And I'd win. And then I would talk to the people, the judges and whatever, get my prize money. And I'd be like, so like, what should I do next? And they're like, you should just drop out.
Oh no.
Because like
Wow.
basically like there's like if you want to make movies, just you're doing it already. Like just
Yeah.
keep making them, and like you don't need school for that. And I was just like, well, I still need a job. so
Yeah.
so my oldest sister was taking library courses, and I was like, well, this looks like a pretty cool chill job. I make some money, obviously. So I took I changed my major or whatever again, and did library courses, and it was like a thing where it was like if I just take these library courses and like one or two other classes, I'll get my degree like right away. And so I did that just so I can get the hell out of college.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
I mean,
and
they
so
told you were wasting your time there, so
yeah, yeah. So and it was funny because like I was taking all these writing courses and they're saying the same thing. You know what I mean? Like they're just like, what is a writing degree going to do for you? Just go make books, you know?
yeah, just go
And
right.
yeah, and so I took the library courses and I got my library degree, and I just after that I just started working at a library.
That's so
Um,
cool.
and at first I didn't really care too much about it, but as I've gotten through it, like I've been at almost for 10 years now, I really do love the profession. I love being a librarian. I love giving people like it's a very I don't even know how to explain it, but good karma. I don't know what to say,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like I
absolutely.
feel like I'm helping people and just through giving them a book, checking a book out to them, like I can
Yeah,
change someone's life just by doing that. Um,
absolutely, yeah.
and so as I've gotten more into it, I started to do things like programming and like teaching kids art, teaching kids comic books, and so now I'm trying to do that more. And but also I love writing comic books, and I want to do like you said, I want to do like local events at libraries and like go
So cool.
around and
Hey,
just like
well,
yeah.
I have a sister who lives in the DFW area, so if I need to go crash at her place for a weekend and do an event at your library, I would be more than happy to.
That'd be dope. That'd be dope. So yeah, like yeah, and I love it. I'm not an actual librarian yet. I'm still getting my degrees, my
Hmm.
at least my master's degree.
Hmm.
So I'm a library assistant right now, but I do everything that a librarian does.
Yeah,
I manage the building whenever the manager isn't there,
yeah,
that kind of stuff. So yeah, and it's a great job. And honestly, I think libraries are needed more now than ever, honestly.
yeah.
But I think the awareness of libraries is probably lower than it's been in a while, at least. I hear
Yeah.
all the time, like people are like, I didn't know people go to libraries anymore.
Oh
And I'm
my
like, they still go.
They
But
do, believe me,
yeah,
they do. Oh man. Well, I'm glad that we brought it up today because, yeah, like I said earlier, I'm a big proponent and a big fan of libraries. I love them as like just, I think, just I don't know, like just for like a fun like thing to do in the middle of the day. If you're like, well, let's go see what's going on at the library. Like, there's
yeah.
usually always something
Yeah.
going on, and
They got programs, they got free resources, they got comic books, they got movies. The one I
yeah,
work at, they have video games now. They have
yeah, I've
Wi-Fi.
seen that. Yeah,
They sometimes they'll have like passes you can get into like, your nature center or your botanical garden or whatever.
yeah,
So they got ebooks, so you can just get your card and leave and just use your phone for the rest of your life,
yeah.
and check out things on your phone. So
Hmm.
it's great. It's a great resource and it's a free resource. You're paying for it already with your tax money.
Yeah.
Might as well use it. So
Everybody get a library card today and go to the library, please.
yes. After high school, I was trying like all that whole time. I was studying screenplay and writing structure and all that stuff. And so that was kind of like my school. And then, like, I want to say in 2022, around that time, I was working at the comic book store. My owner was he used to be a former publisher, comic book writer as well. He
Hmm.
gave me a lot of his scripts and like his Bibles that he would use for new comics.
Hmm.
And so I studied that stuff. He asked me to. There was like the Joe Kubert School. They have an online portion where you can sign up for an online class. It's like a 6 week class. I did one of those for writing. It was taught by Blake Northcott, who worked on Catwoman and Heavy
Oh
Metal
wow.
magazine. She's actually, or I don't know if she is still, but she was working as the Massive Publishing, which is like a thing for the Whatnot app.
Hmm.
But like she's like their CEO.
Wow.
Um, or I don't know if she is still, but I think she is. Anyways, so during all this time, I was like trying to get my feet wet. At first I was trying to do like these big stories that I had been wanting to do, right? I have one called Mother Wolf and Cubs that's like, who knows how long that's going to be. But I was trying to get these series off the ground, right? But I kept on realizing like, if I even like just try to do this, I might be getting like one book a year, like one little comic a year. And if it's like a 30 issue thing, like it's going to take me 30 years, to finish this. I'm just not at the level yet to where I can tell this long of a story that I want to tell, right? So what I kept hearing was start with short comics. And so I finally took that advice Because I was just tired of not having anything, and I was like, I just need something. I want a comic book that's like mine. And so I did this short comic called The Return of Camazotz, and it was just a 2 page because I knew it. I was like, anyone can do a 2 page comic, surely, right? So it was just 2 pages. I worked with artist Azrael Aguiar or Maxim, actually goes by that now. Um, yeah, he was just this guy looking for work, on these Facebook groups and stuff. And so I reached out to him. He had this really cool gothic, like Mike Mignola esque style. And so I was really gravitated to that. Also, Azrael, Raphael, I felt like that was a good match and like names.
Yeah, it
I
rolls
was,
off
I,
the tongue.
yeah, yeah. And so I was like, and I'm a big fan of like, I've read comics. So there's a lot of like good pairings of artists and writers
Yeah.
throughout comic books. Like Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, or like lots of people out there. Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo. You associate a lot of times a writer with an artist because they work so well together, right?
Yeah.
And so that was something that I just kind of felt like right away. And so I sent him that 2 page, just the script. We worked on it together. I developed it myself with I got a letterer, a colorist. I taught myself how to make a comic book, and see it
Yeah.
through completion. And that was really what I needed to do to kind of really light that fire under me, because before that I was just kind of thinking of ideas, or I was trying to send, submissions to like, comic book companies, trying to get their
Hmm.
attention, but like obviously I didn't have anything under my belt, right?
Yeah.
So I was getting nothing back. So once I had that one little 2 page short, and it kind of blew up a little bit on Instagram. It was on I entered it into like a negative space competition, and it was a finalist in that. Um, and along with my other short comic, Mother Wolf and Cubs, which was like a 5 page like short that I made based off that series that I was wanting to do. So they were both finalists, and that helped me get a little bit more traction. That's when Grimcore Studios. I was already talking with their editor, the publisher. Um, his name is Daniel Grimm.
Hmm.
Um, I was already talking to him about like maybe having him edit some of my ideas, and then once that short comic came out, The Return of Camazotz, he was like, dude, this is what you need to focus on. This is what we need. And like he basically was like, I'll edit it for you. We'll publish it. Like, we're going to get this out. And that was another thing I really needed. I really needed an editor to like help me, because I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he really did. He held my hand throughout the whole process. He helped me write the script. He gave me a lot of great feedback throughout while I was writing it, a lot of advice. One thing he said was like, just get a page done a day, right? And I
Yeah.
was like, wow, I didn't even think about that. Like it makes it so that writing isn't hard. It's you just get one page done, and then you can go to sleep, or whatever. You can be happy with that.
Yeah.
And also build momentum while you're doing that. So like the first week you'll do like one page, and then like the third day you'll be like, oh, I did like 3 pages, and then the fourth day you'll be like, oh, I did 10 pages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it builds your momentum, it builds consistency as a writer. So when I always say, like, when you're starting to write a script for a project, at least try to aim for like 1 page a day,
Yeah.
and
It's
that'll
like
get your
exercising a muscle
yeah.
or
It
something.
is. It is. It
Yeah.
is. And after that, we wrote the comic book. It was a graphic novel. We decided to split it up into 3 parts so that we could release it, issue by issue on Kickstarter. And right now we have the all 3 issues and the graphic novel on Kickstarter. And yeah, and it's been a 3 year work in progress. We're finally happy to have it, done, and the reception's been really cool for it and really great.
Yeah.
And I'm just super proud of it. And for that to be my first comic book, like, it's just amazing to me, honestly.
Yeah, as you should be proud of it. It's amazing. I have read the first issue. I need to get the next ones, but I loved it. I was such a fan, and like, and kudos to your artist and the whole team, because
Yeah,
visually it really stands out. When I saw your booth last year, a year ago, I was like, okay, I need to make sure to step away from my table and go check that out, because that looks really cool. And then learning about what the story was, and then I was like, well, I'm going to buy this, of course, and then read it, and it was great. But there was a couple things that you said that really stuck out to me that I thought were interesting right now, and I think things that I've spoken about before. But I think it's interesting, you mentioned about how you learn to read basically with comics, and but you have this sort of negative response from teachers at the time, and I think, or at least I hope, that is shifting, that's changing,
it
because
is.
you think about things like, game theory, for example. Games are being used, or there's like the study of games as like a learning model, for kids and for students. And so I think it's really interesting, and I think that comics do deserve more respect in that sense. Like you like you said, you're reading at this advanced level, and a lot of time there are like really deep lessons,
Mhm.
or critical or like important conversations that are happening in comics,
Yeah.
that people may not realize, because they just they see the the the,
The
the
pictures and
art and the
yeah, they think
pictures, yeah,
they
and
think it's a picture book, and I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
no,
and they
this is
make the
more than that,
judgments. Yeah,
dude.
and it's like there's a
Yeah.
real conversation happening in here, and it can teach a person a lot. So that's really amazing to hear that. And then, you mentioned, you're like, how you said you didn't think you could be an artist, but you could be a writer, and you are a great writer. But I think in a sense, with something like comics, the writing in itself, it's its own kind of art form too.
Mhm.
Your world building, and your artists who are making these illustrations, they're taking cues from your work. And so
Yeah.
I want to make sure that you give yourself that credit, that you are an artist in a sense, because
Yeah.
like I said, it's really great writing. And I really like this because it is a comic. I haven't in a while, but I used to be a really big like comic person. Like I have my collection somewhere here in my office. But at one point, my one of my friends and my boyfriend and myself, we started back home a queer comic book club, and we called it Brunch to the Comic Book Club, because we would meet over brunch with people in from the Rio Grande Valley. And so
It's cool.
we would get together and we would discuss comics that were, typically they were centered around like queer stories. And
Mhm.
so, like I mentioned earlier, there are really important stories being told in these
Yeah.
comics. And so
And the
definitely.
really good thing I want to like mention about that is that those stories are just being told. Like the evolution of comics is kind of crazy if you think about it in an American sense, because in the 50s, whenever comics were being censored,
Hmm.
they were like neutered, like they were comics were basically neutered in the
Yeah.
50s and 60s, and it continued basically until today. I mean, it's still kind of going on. We're still kind of facing a little bit of the ramifications of all that, because people think about like manga versus American comics. There's a reason why manga was able to flourish and advance so well that it has. It's because they didn't have that comics code authority saying you cannot tell these kind of stories,
Yeah.
and that's what happened in America. And because of that, we're still dealing with when people think of comics, they just think of superheroes, because that was
Yeah.
basically the only stories they could tell. They couldn't tell horror. They couldn't tell stories about gay people. They couldn't tell anything. You know what I mean? Like you couldn't have there was a lot of crazy rules in that comics code
Yeah.
authority. And so I think that the stories that we are telling today, like in the modern time, like it's revolutionary, and
Yeah.
because we don't have the code anymore telling us what we can and can't do. So that's why I love comics, and I think in America, like it really is a flourishing genre that people really need to tap into. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of these stories and your work, can you, just because I think we haven't done it yet, but can you give like
yeah.
a description about what the Return of Camazotz is, about what it's about?
Yes. So the Return of Camazotz is a Mayan Gothic horror story. It's about these twin brothers, Victor and Vincent, who go to Mexico to honor their mother who passed away through tragic means. Along their way there, they go to a Mayan ball court. They cause some noise, and this awakens the god of death, Camazotz, and it awakens him. He attacks the brothers. One dies. The other one is now infected and cursed to become the next Camazotz. After that, he starts seeing his brother as a ghost. There's love. There's death. There's bats. There's gothic characters. There's blood and gore. That's going to be coming in this third issue. So it's been a really cool ride. I took a lot of inspiration from just movies I love, like American Werewolf from London, The Crow, and also the mythology of Camazotz, the Mayan hero twins. And I kind of just jumbled it all together, and I knew that this would be a really cool story, that people would be able to instantly like, oh, this is cool, and I understand it like right away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, that was a big point of writing it the way I did, was because like I wanted to use like a werewolf type story, with the
Hmm.
Mayan mythology because I know people understand werewolves. I know people understand, werewolf cinema, right?
Hmm.
So if you add that with the Mayan mythology, they'll be able to understand the Mayan mythology better. Like, and they won't be so. A lot of people, they say it's, it's about Mayan mythology. They just, they give up. Oh, it's history. It's boring. You know what I mean? Like, no, no, this is cool. Like, this
Yeah.
is I'm reinventing it and I'm making it cool again. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
history can be really cool too.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought up that inspiration or those few points of inspiration because I remember shortly before I read your comic, I had actually just seen American Werewolf in London for the first time, like a couple
Hmm.
months before that. So a little over a year ago, and I got to see it in a movie theater, and
Wow.
so I mean, it was great. I loved it, and then I read your
Hmm.
comic, and I was like, wow, I was like, these parallels are really cool, and like. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and but I think it is interesting, you apply this sort of like the storytelling of the werewolf to this creature who I think is, when we look at the lore of it and in the research that we've done for this episode, it's more similar to, or it's a type of vampire. Yeah, I think it's really cool to merge that, like this vampiric creature but with this sort of like story structure of werewolf stories.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it's really great, and I wanted to ask you why, and I feel like I know the answer already to this, but I want you to kind of like explain more to us.
Hmm.
Why the Kamazotz? Like, why, how did you discover that legend specifically? Because when I looked online, there are, of course, I mean, it's the internet, right? There's tons of stuff everywhere, but there's not as many resources about this specific creature
Yeah.
versus other ones, like
Yeah, for
werewolves
sure.
or just a regular,
Egyptian
European
god or whatever.
vampire.
Yeah,
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 right.
yeah.
So, like, how did you come across this legend, and why did you choose this one?
So I can't honestly remember when I first heard about Kamazotz, but I do remember seeing that Batman Mayan statue that I think his name is Kimball.
Yeah.
He created that, and it kind of went viral. People were like, "Oh, look, Batman existed in Mayan culture like a long time ago," and they people kept saying it was Kamazotz. That's what it was, right? So I think that was what really first might have like piqued my interest about it, and I'd read a little bit about the Wikipedia page of Kamazatz or whatever, you know what I mean? Learned a little bit about him through that. But then I kind of, I study, I'm a librarian, right? So I do like to look at and read a lot of the Mayan and Aztec books that there's very few of them, but I do like to look at them and read them and get some information about the gods, Quetzalcoatl, like all of them, like, the Aztec gods and the Mayan gods. Because a lot of times they have a lot of spiritual meanings behind them, and that is not just like they're not just like an Egyptian god that comes and like kills people or whatever. Like I don't know, they have a lot of cool spiritual meanings. So I do like learning about that stuff. One book I'll shout out, David Bowles' Feathered Serpent, Dark Heart of Sky.
Hmm.
If you read that, it's basically like a retelling of the Mayan and Aztec codexes, in a very laid out, like this is the beginning and this is, where we are now. And in that book, there's a story, of Kamazotz and the Mayan hero twins and their encounter with Kamazotz. And so and also I was working at a comic book store, right? And I remember it was during COVID, right? This is whenever I really came up with the short comic. Um, it was during COVID, and I just remember hearing about how the whole COVID started because of a bat, right? Someone ate a bat or something, and so
Yeah.
I was like, so something just clicked in my head, and I was like, wait, if a bat started this whole epidemic and people are dying, like, is this like some kind of force of Kamazotz? Like Kamazotz is the kind of like
Oh my gosh.
controlling this,
Yeah.
and that's what I don't know. My mind works that way, you know what I mean? And
Yeah. No, that's such an interesting connection.
and I remember like I started seeing like bats and like everywhere. I was like it was like signs, and so
Yeah.
I made that short comic, and then and it blew up, and then now I'm doing this, um,
Wow.
and so I don't know. There was something about it. I love Batman. I love bats. I love Gothic culture. It was something that was like just kind of telling me to tell the story. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know, like you're right. Like when I was doing the research for this, there isn't a lot of, real good resources that you can use. Like, you can use Wikipedia, but that's how accurate is that? You
Yeah.
know, there's tons of articles you can read about him, but who knows how accurate those are? And so I kind of just read everything. I read everything, and I tried to figure out what he meant to me. Like there was like this one. There was a lot of people saying Kamazotz is like, a singular deity god, and like he's like, he's Kamazotz and he's like a one god. There's other people saying that Kamazotz is like a group of bats that live in Xibalba, and they're all collectively known as Kamazotz, and there isn't just one, like, god. So
Yeah.
I was hearing these two different, sides, and I was like, well, maybe it's both. Like maybe there is a Kamazotz, and maybe there is a race of Kamazotz. You know what I mean? And they're just
Yeah.
collectively called Kamazotz. And that's what it made sense to me. And that was just because I was taking in all the information, right?
Yeah.
And I even talked to David Bowles, like, and a couple, like, a podcast, or not podcast, but like Latinx Visions.
Hmm.
I was like, hey, like, what is it? Is it one or is it the other? And he was like, it's both. And I was like, I knew it. I was like, I knew that, man. Like, why are people fighting about it?
Yeah.
And so I didn't, like, whenever I was writing it, I didn't really know which one it was, right? And
Hmm.
so, but I was like, well, people think he's a singular god, so I'll make him the singular god. But then while you're writing the story, while I'm working on the story, it's like it's both. Like I really make it both. So I don't know. Like I felt like that was another part of writing the story, or like the meaning of writing it. Like I wanted it to be like it's all the mythology. Like there's no one true mythology. It's all of it. All of it has created the mythology of Kamazotz, right? Because
Yeah.
mythology doesn't end. It doesn't have a you know ending. We're constantly retelling the stories. We're adding new mythology to it, and this is what the Return of Camazotz is. It's like another layer of the mythology.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to really explain to people, and it's like, yeah, that's just what it is. Yeah,
I like this idea of it being like a cluster or a group of them, and then also being like this one singular thing, right?
yeah. He's the leader of the Camazotz. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
that's how I pictured it.
Yeah. Was there ever an option for it to be a different, like, monster or entity or deity? Like, was that ever on the table, or has it's always been Kamazotz?
Once the publisher came in, it was like it's Camazotz. Like I wanted it to be about Camazotz.
Yeah.
And so whenever I was first developing an idea, not that wasn't going to be, it was a separate idea that I was trying to work on my own, right? And I was trying to do this idea of the Mayan hero twins and their journey through Xibalba and all this stuff, right? And it was going to be like a modern retelling of that. That's when the publisher reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, I want you to do this Kamazotz book." And I was like, "Okay, well, I can try to I can push this, and I can, like, add it, apply it. You know what I mean?"
Yeah.
Because I'd done all this work, and I don't know. That's how I feel writing really is, or coming up with ideas. Is that, like, whenever you come up with ideas or you're writing, it's good to do it. And even if you don't make it, don't worry, because you can always try to apply it to something else that does get made. And that way you're not wasting your time doing what you did, right? Right? You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah. I think as like any creator can relate to that. It's like you get
Yeah.
to a point with something where you're like, okay, I need to pivot because the demand is
Yeah.
over here. So,
Yes.
but I mean, and that's such a good skill though. That is a real
Mhm.
skill
Yes.
to have, because I think early on in the days of this show, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But now I've gotten really good at it, where I'm like, all right, we're going with it now. We're taking the direction. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a real testament to your skill as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And yeah, I forgot what the
Nice.
rest of the question was.
No, I was just asking if there was
Yeah.
ever any sort of other option
Oh, so
for.
yeah, basically not. Like once the publisher got in,
Yeah,
it was like, no, this is about Kamazotz. I got to really focus in on Kamazotz. So
nice. And were there any? I know that you mentioned the movies earlier, American Werewolf in London, The Crow, The Batman, maybe. But were there
yeah,
ever any other, or are there any other inspirations for this story and for this?
yeah. I'll say for the artist, he's very inspired by like Hellboy, but also, I mean, Hellboy has his own encounter with Kamazotz, and in Hellboy Goes to Mexico, I think it's called. Um,
Right. That's
so
right.
that
Yeah.
I remember I studied that book because I knew that's what Azrael's artwork kind of looked like.
Hmm.
So I wanted to kind of like read that and then like write my book so I can kind of like just have that in my mind.
Yeah.
Um, the colors of I think it's Dave Stewart, who does the colors on that book, as well as just movies like Suspiria, the colors in that movie, and
Nice.
Dario Argento, I forget how to say his name,
Yeah.
but
Dario Argento, the
yeah,
Giallo.
yes, his style was
Hmm.
very influential. And yeah, I think that's about it. Just like horror movies in general, but also Batman too. I mean, Batman, Man Bat, um, like the even science fiction movies like The Fly,
Yeah.
or
Mm.
like I know I don't call it a science fiction book, but there's a little bit of science fiction in the story too. And which I like. I like that it's all of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, The Fly was another one. So just this idea of a man turning into it and being gross about it, you know?
Yeah. Oh,
I
God.
love that. So
Yeah. I want to ask just because I think people make a lot of assumptions when we do this sort of work, or for people who work in like horror or the paranormal stuff or anything related to it. But I'm curious, as we approach the end of our time today, do you believe in or have you ever experienced anything paranormal?
yeah, it's like every day or like all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I just live in it, you know what I mean? That's why I study Aztec Mayan calendar, and I learn about ways to kind of like honor my ancestors, and you know, and just be respectful to Mother Earth and all the deities and entities that exist around us. So I do believe in the spiritual. I think it's always around us. I think things move all the time, or things get lost all the time, and it's because these things are trying to hide things from me or whatever, or maybe get this thing off my mind for a little bit so I can
Yeah.
focus on something else. I don't know. I think I live in the spiritual. So Ghost. Yes, I've experienced ghosts. I remember when I moved into my first apartment, um, the first like couple weeks, I would have this encounter where like I would see a spirit kind of like go like past me or something, like kind of
Oh
almost
my
through me,
God.
and it was like a light almost a little bit when it got really close to you, and you could see kind of like a light around him, and
Could you feel that as it was
yeah,
happening?
I could
What did it
feel
feel
it.
like?
It feels like a wind almost, or it
Oh,
feels
wow.
like a little bit of like light like touching you or something.
Yeah.
And that I later learned that the person that lived there previously had died there. So
Oh
I
my
was like, holy
God.
shit. So that was his spirit maybe trying to like, I'm in here now, right? And I'm doing the sage and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's how I am. But like,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I think he vanished, or maybe he's still living there. I don't know. He didn't
Yeah.
really bother me too much.
Hmm.
Um, I have like this toy Halloween dog, and I swear it's my one of my dog is possessed into that toy,
Oh my
because
God.
like sometimes that thing will like turn on for no reason, and I swear there was no bad reason at one time it was turning on.
Oh
um
God.
I used to leave it outside my door, you know, at my apartment, so like, you know, just so I could stay out there, but it
Yeah.
would sometimes just turn on its own, and I'd have to go run out there and like turn it off, and
Oh
you
my
know, mess with
God.
it, and yeah. So I don't know, I believe in that kind of stuff, so that's just how it is for me.
Yeah, I love that answer too. That you said, "I live in the spiritual," like because I think, and like we all do. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's one of those things where, and I'm sure there are some people who would say like, "Well, no, like that's not for me." But I don't know. I'm just like I feel like there's no option.
yeah,
We just
yeah,
it
no.
just is what it is.
I used to be
There's
super like when I was younger. I used to like, no, I don't believe in all this stuff. I was very trying to scientific and almost
yeah,
agnostic in a way. But it was because experience kept happening to me, and you can't stop it. You know, it's just something that you either have to learn to like understand and just accept. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's one of those things where it's, and some would argue like, well, there is a science to it, but
Yeah,
I feel like,
but we don't understand it yet. You know what I mean?
yeah, oh
Like,
yeah, and I was like, and that's kind of what science is. Science is just a
yeah,
bunch of questions, it's
yeah,
it's we don't it's things that we don't understand that we try to figure out, and so I think that is
and
definitely part of it.
and the indigenous people, they kind of do understand it, and they can explain it better, and they do have a science almost for it, and so that's what I like to study. That's the like indigenous understanding of life and everything. So it's all there, man, and
Yeah.
yeah. So
Do you have any other like indigenous legends that you know of that you really like or that come to mind?
La Llorona, I mean, I would love to do a story. I mean, I had an idea of doing a story with her and Mother Wolf and Cubs.
Oh,
So, and then Mother Wolf and Cubs is like this samurai werewolf story, about this mother and her two kids, and you know, she turns into a werewolf, but she's also a samurai, or she was trained to be a samurai.
whoa.
And it takes place in Texas, but during the whole like, is this Texas or is this America or is this you know, Mexico? And during
Yeah.
that whole terrible like time.
Yeah.
it was tough to be a Mexican during that time.
Oh yeah.
So I wanted to set it in that, have, La Llorona tell a little bit about her and have her fight, Mother Wolf and cubs and shit.
Oh
So
god.
I don't know.
That is I
Yeah.
feel like a comic around like La Llorona and like maybe like the curse of La Llorona or like surviving
Hmm.
her. I think that would be a great story and I would love to see that happen. So
Yeah.
I will be patiently waiting, I'm sure, with many other people for that to come out of Grimcore and from you. I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so we are nearing or we are at the end of our time today. I just wanted to say thank you again so much. And um, if people wanted to follow your work, if they wanted to support your work, how can they do that?
You can follow me at Camazotz Comics on almost every social media app because we got to have them all.
Hmm.
And you can find the publisher at Grimcore Studios or Grimcore Horror, depending on the social media app. You can always follow them on the website and check out all our stuff that we have at grimcorestudios.com. And yeah, I live in the DFW area. I'm at local conventions over here all the time. I try to do things in Austin or in Texas mostly. And so yeah, come visit me at a convention. I'll sign your comics and I'll have a chat. So
Nice. And is the Kickstarter, how is that still running? How long is that running for?
yes, it's running till the end of November.
Okay.
So you still got a couple weeks to pick it up, get it, check it out. We have a lot of comics for sale, a lot of variant covers for the third issue. We got the graphic novel. We have a limited cover for the graphic novel, which is going to be very limited. So that's a cool one to get. And yeah, support it until you can. And then after this, the only way you'll be able to get it for a little while is be through me personally. So get it now while you can. Donate it to your library, and yeah.
Rafael, again, thank you so much for your time today. This has meant a lot to me, and I'm so excited to share the Return of Camazotz with everybody. If they have not read it, please go check it out. Do yourself a favor. It is a great comic, and I'm excited to see what else you do. And yeah, thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Ayden, for having me. It's always a pleasure talking to you and getting to hang out. So just love what you do and just keep doing what you're doing, man, because you're doing great. So.
Thank you, and you too. Bye, y'all. Welcome back, Wolf friends. Thank you so much for listening to that story and then the interview with Rafael. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Again, I know that I said it before, but I'm gonna say it again, and the links will be in the description notes below. But by the time this episode comes out, we will be reaching the last few days of the Kickstarter. So you will have time to back it if there's still slots open. Make sure that you go do that. If you ran out of slots for whatever reason, like Rafael said in the interview, you can reach out to him directly to get your copy of The Return of Camazotz. It's such a good comic, a good graphic novel, and I'm so excited to see what else they do. Do yourself a favor and check it out. We're going to go ahead and get into some sources that we have here. This first one is, of course, from good old Wikipedia. We're getting just like a general kind of background of Camazotz. This says, in the late post-classic Maya mythology of the Popol Vuh, which is kind of like, it's a text from the Quiche people of Guatemala, the indigenous people. It's kind of like their creation story or stories. That's what this text is, the Popol Vuh or Vuh. It's V-U-H, Popol Vuh, Popol Vuh. But Camazotz is referenced in that. This says that Camazotz is a bat spirit at the service of the lords of the underworld. Camazotz means death bat in the Quiche language, and in Mesoamerica generally, the bat is often associated with night, death, and sacrifice. And there's a quick section here about the etymology of the word, and it says Camazotz is formed from the Quiche words Kame, K-A-M-E, meaning death, and Sotz, S-O-T-Z, meaning bat. So Kame, Sotz, death bat. And then about the mythology, this says in the Popol Vuh, again, that creation story text, says Camazotz are the bat-like spirits encountered in the Maya hero twins Hanapu and Xibalanque during their trials in the underworld of Xibalba, which is what, of course, this story was based around. The twins had to spend the night in the House of Bats, where they squeezed fused themselves into their own blowguns in order to defend themselves from the circling bats. Hanapu stuck his head out of his blowgun to see if the sun had risen, and Camazotz immediately snatched off his head and carried it to the ball court to be hung up as the ball to be used by the gods in their next ball game. So there's that kind of god of decapitation thing. The bat said, yoink, here's the ball for this game, have fun. So that is broadly what the Camazotz is, right? Moving on to this next source. This is from Historical Mexico, and it's historicalmx.org. Again, all direct links to these sources will be in the Susto Google Docs on patreon.com/Susto podcast. But this was written by an Eli Adams, and this does a bit more of like a full explanation of what the Mayan bat god Camazotz is. It says, Templo Mayor, located in downtown Mexico City, has an adjacent museum that proudly displays artifacts and renditions of items from the Mesoamerican civilizations. The top floor of this museum contains a recreated statue of the Mayan bat god, Camazotz, also known as Tzotzilaha Chamalcan. The name Camazotz translates to either death bat, like we said earlier, or snatch bat. This deity appears in the Popol Vuh and is still a very prominent figure in the continuing Maya religion. So this is still a deity or an entity that is recognized to this day, right? This says Camazotz is described as an anthropomorphized leaf-nosed bat, which you all, if you know me, if you're new here, you know that or maybe you don't actually, I don't know if I talk about this a lot, but I love bats. I follow the Austin Bat Sanctuary, which if anybody out there in the Austin Bat Sanctuary is listening, hey, hi, first of all, I want to go volunteer. And number two, I feel like I should have turned this into an episode that would have been like the triple threat feature of this episode, is doing something there. But hey, you know what? There's still time. Maybe in the new year, I will make a visit there. And also, you may have seen in one of my most recent episodes at Lost Edge Tattoo that I got a tattoo of a bat on my knee because I just think bats are cool. And then learning all of this lore, I was like, wow, yeah, hell yeah, I was right. Bats are cool. And fun fact, they are one of Texas's natural pollinators. So protect bats, and you can protect them by staying away from them. Do not handle them if you're not a professional. I would just say that, even though they can be really cute a lot of the times. But anyway, Camazotz is described as a bat, an anthropomorphized leaf-nosed bat, so kind of like humanoid bat figure. This, though, has led to conjecture about the source of the myth. Some believe that the ancient peoples based him on the common vampire bat, or on Desmoda's draculae, a much larger species, but both are leaf-nosed bats as well. Because there's I think well over 100 species of bat. That word, I always have trouble with it. Species. Both of these species inhabited the area of Oaxaca, Mexico in 100 AD, when a bat deity was first mentioned in a cult of the Zapotec tribe. The Zapotecs believed bats represented night, death, and sacrifice. This was likely due to the fact that the bats would inhabit the caves around the sacred cenotes, which the Mesoamericans believed were portals to the underworld, or Xibalba, right, being one of those places. It would be a very chilling sight at dusk when the bats would swarm out of these portals and begin drinking the blood of the other animals. The god is also commonly depicted holding a sacrificial knife in one hand and a human head or sacrificial victim in the other. Maybe that should be on my other knee. That should be my other tattoo, right? Is like a hand with the dagger and a head. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. But also this reminds me of, you all know I live in Austin, and I don't think I've ever been to see the bats, to the Bat Bridge, which is like a super touristy, popular thing to do here in Austin. Austin is like a bat city because of that bridge. But yeah, it's like people will go to the bridge to watch the bats fly out. That makes me think, is that place a portal? I need to reach out to some paranormal investigators and say, let's go do some investigation under the Bat Bridge and see, because the bats are these communicators with the underworld. Like, is that a portal? Is there a portal to the underworld there? Now I'm getting really conspiracy theory, but anyway. This continues. Camazotz was eventually adopted into the mythology of the Quiche or Quiche Maya in Guatemala, though they merged him with their god of fire, Tzotzilaha Chamalcan. Though in the Popol Vuh, Tzotzilaha was the name of the house of bats in the underworld where the hero twins were forced to spend the night by the lords of Xibalba. And then this talks more about that and kind of what we base the story on. This says, the legend is that the hero twins slept inside their blowguns, again, what we read in Wikipedia, to protect themselves from the bats. However, when the bats went silent, That's when Xbalanque asked Hunahpu to check if dawn had come, and when he did, he poked his head out of the tube, but in fact it was not yet dawn, and one of the bats took the opportunity to swoop down and rip away Hunahpu's head, leaving him decapitated. The other brother, Xbalanque, was left inside the tube, questioning what his brother was seeing and why he had gone so still without receiving any answers. That actually would make for like a terrifying, scary movie kind of scene, right? This continues. The bat then took the head of Hunahpu to the ball court of the Xibalba lords to be gruesomely displayed and used as a ball, while the lords rejoiced in their assumed victory. This says later in the Popol Vuh, a messenger from the underworld in the form of a humanoid bat, again believed to be Camazotz, appeared to broker a deal between humanity and Lord Dohil, the patron god of the Quiche. In this deal, mankind promised their armpits and their waists in exchange for fire, which is how the ritual of cutting open a person's breast in sacrifice came to be. Some myths claim that during the day, Camazotz would turn into a stone statue and therefore could only move at night, but this has not been confirmed. This is interesting, this wording of promising their armpits and their waists. I guess I did that because my waist is missing. Can you find it? I'm kidding. That's interesting, again, wording. I would be curious to see this in like a more full context. Right? But we're going to move on to the next source. This is from allthat'sinteresting.com. This is titled Camazotz, the Maya Death Bat that served the lords of the underworld. This says a fearsome spirit of the Maya underworld whose name means death bat in the Quiche language. Camazotz was associated with night, death, and again, human sacrifice. This saying specifically with human sacrifice, not just, I was thinking initially general, like, you know, you have to sacrifice things and it's like more inspirational that way. But no, this is specifically about human sacrifice. And this says the ancient Maya had hundreds of deities that they believed watched over humanity, established order, and controlled the realm of the dead. Many of these gods and spirits were downright terrifying, but one of the scariest of them all was Camazotz. Portrayed as an anthropomorphic leaf-nosed bat, again as we heard in the previous source, Camazotz was a spirit of death, night, and sacrifice. He supposedly fed on blood, and legend says he even played a role in the origin of the sacrificial rituals the Maya were known for. See, we always see, I think, a lot about, and we talked about this in the last episode about the Abchanchu, right? We're like on a vampire kick right now. But we spoke a lot about the different kinds of vampires around the world and how there's a very large and strong European influence on vampire stories or vampire lore in general, right? But this is an ancient thing, right? And they're saying that this anthropomorphic bat, so this kind of like humanoid bat, fed on blood, so that like, is that a vampire then, right? Like I would assume that's vampire. Anyway, this continues. Experts believe Camazotz was inspired by the giant vampire bats that used to swarm the skies over Central America. One of these species of bats, Desmodius draculae, is now extinct, but its nearly 2-foot wingspan and tendency to prey on animals as large as deer likely contributed to the idea of a vicious bat-like spirit. So there was this giant bat that would prey on larger animals, right? Because normally when you think of bat, I think of like palm size, something small, right? Or at least their bodies always like palm size. But if there's a bat with a 2-foot wingspan, I would assume that would be bigger than the hand. And I'm sure there are bats that are bigger than a hand now. I'm just like, when I think of a bat, I think of something small and cute. This continues. While the Maya civilization rapidly declined by the 11th century CE, the mythology surrounding Camazotz carries on to this day. And it's just as horrifying now as it was nearly 2,000 years ago. This talks about the origins of Camazotz, and a bat-like deity was first mentioned by the indigenous Zapotec people of Mexico around 100 CE. The Zapotecs believed that bats represented death because they often saw them flying out of the sacred cenotes, or caves that they believed were portals to the underworld. Again, I'm going to go back to the Austin Bat Bridge idea because that is a bridge over water. So there's this combination of things, right? Is the caves in the cenotes, which we know are like they're bodies of water, and the Austin Bat Bridge, they're under the bridge, which could serve, it's cavernous, so to speak, and it's over a body of water. There may be a portal to the underworld under Austin, y'all. We need to look into the, I'm trying to remember, what were the indigenous people that were in Austin? I think it was the Tonka, let me look it up and not be wrong. Tonkawa, that's what I knew it. So I know the Coahuiltecan people were inhabitants of like many parts of Texas, but I think even Coahuiltecan is like a more broad way to categorize indigenous groups of peoples. But I think the Tonkawa were also specifically here in Austin. So anyway, I'm going off the deep end here. Sorry, we're going to continue here. The Quiche Maya of modern-day Guatemala likely adopted this bat deity and combined it with their own fire god to create the horror that is Camazotz. So I wonder, like, where more of the features of fire come into Camazotz. Like, can Camazotz control fire, create fire? Like, is there any influence on Camazotz itself? This continues. Even Camazotz's name is frightening. Again, this explains the Kame and Sotz death bat etymology there. It says that he was a large leaf-nosed bat with a human-like form. He was usually depicted with a sacrificial knife in one hand, again, and a human heart in the other. See, I think that is a badass image for a tattoo. The bat and the heart, or the knife and the heart. I think I got my next one set up already. Sorry, Mom. This says, according to ancient origins, Camazotz was said to fly out of caves, grab victims by the neck, and decapitate them before soaring away. This idea likely came from one of the most well-known myths about the death bat, or that could easily be mistaken for a nightmare. Again, this question has come up before, or this conversation has come up in live events that I've done, where we talk about Latina people and being afraid of birds or things that fly, because you have, you know, like the Tlahuelpuchi, which is like turkey vulture kind of thing. We have the lechuzas, which is the owl, and there's been other ones that have come up, and people are like, why is it always birds? Why is it things that can fly that the Latina people are afraid of? And again, there's ties to like indigenous beliefs and how certain things would work for, or were part of the underworld, or could go between the underworld and our world, and so it's like omens of death. And that, listen, you can listen to, just throw a dart to any Susto episode, and we've had this conversation before, but again, this is just reinforcing that conversation, or it's bringing it up again for me. This continues. The blood-soaked depictions of Camazotz in Maya mythology. The gruesome story of Camazotz and the hero twins Hanapu and Xbalanque can be found in the Popol Vuh, again, a sacred narrative of the Quiche Maya that contains all the indigenous mythology of the civilization, including the Maya creation myth and a chronicle of the Quiche people, according to the World History Encyclopedia. And then this talks about the Popol Vuh, and it says it translates literally to Book of the Mat, because so many Maya people heard its stories while sitting on mats and listening to their elders pass them down. However, it's essentially a record of the community, as it preserves the history and culture of the Quiche civilization. The stories have existed for millennia, but they weren't committed to paper until the 16th century. Within the Popol Vuh are numerous stories about Hanapu and Xbalanque, the demigod hero twins who played a large role in Maya mythology. In one of the tales, the twins were challenged again to spend the night in Sotzilaja, or the House of Bats. And then again, this talks about the blowguns, how they hid in it, and then how they tried to peek out, but they met their demise, right? And one of them was decapitated. And then I'm going to skip down to the last part of this source, and this talks about how the legend of the nightmarish Maya death bat persists to this day. This says, vampire bats still fly the skies above Mexico and Central America today, but the common vampire bat has nothing on the species that existed alongside the Maya. Desmodius draculae went extinct in the 1800s, but while it lived, it would have been a sight to behold. With a wingspan of 20 inches, the creature was larger than a computer keyboard, and it sucked the blood of animals like deer and llamas. While these giant bats died out hundreds of years ago, strange sightings of huge bat-like creatures continued well into the 20th century. According to Blue Roadrunner, in the 1950s, a couple walking in Pelotas, Brazil, reported seeing two large humanoids in a tree one night. Authorities wrote them off, insisting they'd simply spotted large birds, but the sightings continued. In 1976, two girls spied a large bird-like figure they described as having a gorilla-like face. The next day, it was discovered that the creature had left behind several three-toed tracks. Sightings of this bird or bat with a gorilla face have occurred as far north as Texas. I was going to bring that up, where several farmers claim to have encountered it in their fields. With so many sightings on record, it's difficult to write off the existence of some sort of humanoid bat creature that flies around consuming livestock. Perhaps it's even Camazotz himself. So I'm seeing there needs to be a team up of like Camazotz and the Chupacabra, right? But also this thing about Texas, this was interesting because I've heard stories, and we need to cover it. We'll probably do that in this next year. Is there's like the stories of like the Thunderbird, I think is what they called it. There may be other names for it, but I've heard these stories about like these large anomalous birds in Texas, especially in agricultural areas. Of course, in South Texas, where I'm from, there's stories about sightings of these giant birds. Keep your ears open for that one. I'm going to look into that. We're going to move on to the next source. This is mythicalcreaturesandbeasts.com. So this one says a lot of what we've already spoken about in these other sources, but But there's something interesting here, and this is something that Rafael mentioned in his interview as well, is this says that Camazotz was not just one creature, but in some stories, an entire race of bat-like death gods or demons. Ancient Mayan mythology is rich with tales of gods, monsters, and cosmic punishments, and Tzotzilaha Chamalcan remains one of the most feared beings within those narratives. He emerged as a symbol of divine retribution and the price of disobedience to the gods. So he was a punisher. Something also really interesting in this source is they talk about the abilities that Camazotz has. It says blood drinking. Much like a vampire, he fed on the blood of humans and animals, often leaving entire villages drained. Then there's nocturnal flight. He would only appear at night, flying in total silence and attacking without warning. This could also be not only an ability, but maybe kind of like a curse or like a detriment to the Camazotz, because in the other source earlier, they said that during the day, Camazotz turns into a statue, and they can only, so that means that they're stuck for 12 hours out of each day, right? And they can only fly in the night. They can, that's when they come to life, which this moves on, says daytime concealment. Some legends say that he turns to stone by day, hiding in temples or cliffs to avoid detection. So, I mean, that could be a good cover, right? Like, oh, it's just a statue. But then when night falls, they come out of that disguise, right? And then lastly, this says commanding infernal armies. In some stories, he led death spirits and bat demons in battle against rebellious humans or rival gods. And then this talks about some symbols with the Camazotz, and it says there's, of course, a symbol of the cave, which symbolize entrances to the underworld, as if we've said repeatedly. There's the blood and death, which is due to their nocturnal nature and their association with decay, and then sacrifice, which is a central theme in Mayan spirituality, is what it says here. And it says Tzotzilaha Chamalcan was the embodiment of these ideas. He was not only feared for his appearance and power, but for what he represented: the absolute dominance of the gods and the ever-present threat of annihilation for disobedience. In certain regions, rituals and offerings were made to bat deities or spirits to avoid disease, disaster, or invasion. This suggests a deeper cultural reverence wrapped in dread. See, now this is interesting because this says absolute dominance of the gods, where I think in other sources the wording is that Camazotz basically like works for the gods or the lords of the underworld. Who knows like what kind of like what the hierarchy, so to speak, is with this relationship, and maybe there is no hierarchy and it's like a vertical or a lateral sort of relationship. The next source that we have here, this is from JSTOR. This is an academic one, and this is from an article, a journal article, and this says Bats and the Camazotz correcting a century of mistaken identity. And this one, I'm going to be very honest with you all, I did not read through these articles, but this is all about the Camazotz. This is going to make a really interesting read if you do have access to this article, and I'm sure there are other places to find it that are outside of JSTOR and not behind a login wall or something. But this is again Bats and the Camazotz correcting a century of mistaken identity, and this is by, I believe, James E. Brady and Jeremy D. Coltman in Latin American Antiquity, volume 27. However, I will say, just like grazing over this, there is a ton of imagery, and it's really, really cool to see this. I'll see what I can post on social media that is in here. There's like a fire-mouthed cave bat with crossbones on its wings, which just looks cool as hell. And then the last source that we have here, this is actually a chapter, or part of a chapter at least, from the Popol Vuh. It says Popol Vuh, Book 2, Chapter 10, Creation/Sacred Myths of Ki'icha People. I'm going to read this, and it says, Chapter 10, afterward they entered the House of Cold, which I believe this is a part of the brothers' stories, and again, part of what we base our story off of. They entered the House of Cold. It is impossible to describe how cold it was. The house was full of hail. It was the mansion of cold. Soon, however, the cold was ended because with a fire of old logs, the boys made the cold disappear. That is why they did not die. They were still alive when it dawned. Surely what the lords of Xibalba wanted was that they would die, but it was not thus. And when it dawned, they were still full of health, and they went out again when the messengers came to get them. How is this? They are not dead yet, said the lords of Xibalba. They were amazed to see the deeds of Hanapu and Xblanake. Presently the boys entered the house of jaguars. The house was full of jaguars. Do not bite us. Here is what belongs to you, the boys said to the jaguars, and quickly they threw them some bones to the animals, which pounced upon the bones. Now surely they are finished. Now already they have eaten their own entrails. At least they have given themselves up. Now their bones have been broken. So said the guards, all happy because of this. So as you can see, we did just like a modern adaptation or a modern retelling of these stories. So they're in the house of jaguars, and instead of throwing them animal bones, they threw them protein bars that they had packed with them, right, in our story. Again, as always, kudos and round of applause for Jeffrey taking the lead on this story and writing it. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead, and this talks about how they then go into the house of the bats. This says, they then put them in the house of bats. There was nothing but bats inside this house, the house of Camazotz, a large animal whose weapons for killing were like a dry point, and instantly those who came into their presence perished. They were in there then, but they slept inside their blowguns, and they were not bitten by those who were in the house. Nevertheless, one of them had to give up because of another Camazotz that came from the sky and made him come into sight. The bats were assembled in council all night and flew about. There is a word here that we tried to use as a sound cue in the script, and I'd never seen this word here, and it's here now. It says quilits, quilits, they said. So they were saying all night, which I believe is the sound that the bats are making. That is how they onomatopoeia'd that noise. Quilits, quilits, which it could sound like a chirping maybe of the bats. Even though I know bats don't chirp, but they make these like kind of chittering sounds. This continues. They stopped for a little while, however, and they did not move and were pressed against the end of one of the blowguns. Then Xbalanque said to Hanapu, "Look you, has it begun already to get light?" "Maybe so, I am going to see," Hanapu answered. And as he wished very much to look out the mouth of the blowgun and wished to see if it had dawned, instantly Camazotz cut off his head and the body of Hanapu was decapitated. Xbalanque asked again, "Has it not yet dawned?" But Hanapu did not move. "Where have you gone, Hanapu? What have you done?" But he did not move and remained silent. That's actually so sad. Then Xbalanque felt concerned and exclaimed, "Unfortunate are we are completely undone." They went immediately to hang the head of Hanapu in the ball court, and by special order of Han Kame and Vukub Kame, all the people of Xibalba rejoiced for what had happened to the head of Hanapu. That's intense. This is an intense story. This quote is so, I don't know why this quote just stuck out to me. "Unfortunate are we are completely undone." It's so just like filled with gloom and doom. Just God, it's like this admission of we're defeated, and it's sad, really. And those were all the sources that we have for you. Welcome back, Wolf friends. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, the last episode of Susto for the year of 2025. Again, make sure you stick around through December for the Susto Swap-a-thon. And also remember to hear your story on Susto. You can visit my website or my link tree and send your story in. It doesn't have to be just a written story, although we love those. I love giving them the Susto treatment. But you can also send in a photo, a video, an audio recording, anything that you think is paranormal. Please send it in and I will share it either on Susto or on Susto social medias, which you can follow at Susto Podcast on every platform for all things spooky and updates on the show. And if you'd like to support the show, as always, the easiest way is by engaging with the show wherever you are listening to it, sharing it with your ghoul friends, and leaving positive ratings and reviews. Reviews like this one from Anita Sanchez, and Anita said, "Definitely love all the stories, listening to them all one by one. Definitely love it, and I hope to hear more soon. Hearts emojis." Anita, thank you so much. I'm not sure where you are on your listening journey. This review was left a while ago, and so maybe you're caught up, maybe you haven't. If you are, I hope you get to this point and you hear this, and I want to say thank you so much for listening and for leaving that lovely review. If you have already left a positive rating or review, or you're looking for another way to support, you can also support Susto for $3 or more a month by signing up on patreon.com/Susto Podcast, and you can choose your tier, decide what works for you. It is winter holiday season coming up, so if you want to gift someone a subscription, you can maybe look into that. But speaking of, I want to say thank you to this episode's patrons. As always, you mean the underworld, the Xibalba underworld to me, and you are Liza, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, D, Josette, Sam, Mandy, Laurie, Jeannie, Desiree C, Ashes, Neressa, Rachel A, Azucena, Marlene, Lainey, Desiree A, Ricardo, Vanessa, Maritza, Nieves, Manormal, Iris, Mar, Flor, Selena, Nightingale, Clint, Rachel W, and Armani. Thank you so much for your support on Patreon. It means so much to me. It helps me to keep on going. It's helped me throughout the year, and I'm so excited to keep bringing you content both publicly and on Patreon. But again, I'm just super grateful for the year of 2025. I am looking forward to 2026. Listen, just because there are no new Susto episodes, I will definitely be online. So please hit me up all over the socials, email me, message me, whatever. I'm still going to be online. I'm not like going anywhere, just, taking a little break from the production cycle. So either way, just really grateful for this year. I hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season. Until next year, no te asustes. Bye.